the tort or the civil suit.
Hang on, we have a question over on Rumble from American First. He says, so the system is white too. I don't get that one. I get individual being white. Because when the term whiteness was invented, it was not a reference to skin color. It was a reference to people who do not work in the sun. So they were saying when the term whiteness was originally created, it was about essentially the class of people that owns property. It wasn't about the skin color of the people. It was about these are the people who own property, slaves. They don't work in the sun. They like whiteness was a distinguishing feature about who was the capitalist class. That's why when they're talking about critical race theory, they're talking about the system level, the owners of private property versus the people who do not own private property. Oppressor, oppressed narrative, bourgeois, proletarian narrative. That's what they're referring to. This is one of those code switching things you got to do in your head. But I promise you, if you do this, if you listen, they're always talking about the system. That's why systemic racism exists as a term. They're talking about the system that upholds racism. Yes, that's why they called Larry Elder the black face of white supremacy. Exactly. And this is another good example. So when property ownership rights were extended to all past slavery, anyone could own property, and that means anyone could assimilate to the ideals of whiteness. Someone said this over on Rumble. This is why Larry Elder is called the black face of white supremacy. This is why there's this idea of multiracial whiteness in NPR and the Washington Post. This is why Cheryl Harris, who wrote the paper Whiteness is Property, literally said black people can be white too.
Secondly, post-racialism's commitment to protect some value in whiteness, however relative, what Derek Bell called the promise not to be the face at the bottom of the well, it coexists with expanding whiteness to encompass non-whites. Post-racial whiteness is conditionally available to persons of any racial group, even some blacks. Whiteness is not a skin color or even a racial type. It is a social relation constructed on exclusion, structural privilege, and its valorization.
This is why they were burning down black-owned businesses during the Black Lives Matter riots, because it was never about black skin color, because they don't consider the blacks who have businesses, who own property, to be politically black. This is why Joe Biden said, if you don't vote for me, you ain't black. They're talking about political blackness or political whiteness, as it were. That's what they're referring to. I know this is a difficult one for most people to make, but that is actually what the deal is. Yeah, he was calling you a capitalist. If that actually happened, he was calling you a capitalist. He's not talking communist. Bro, you've been sitting here watching the socialism conference with me all weekend. Have they given you the impression that they support individualism? No, they have literally said they don't support individualism over and over and over and over and over again. Socialists do not think in terms of individualism. Socialists think in terms of collectivized. They think about the collective. They want the society to be about the collective, the community. And so when they're saying things like racism, they're not talking about individual racism. They're talking about collective racism. When they talk about things like cis heteronormativity, they're not talking about individuals. They're talking about the collective system that upholds the norms of capitalism. Once you guys understand this, you will understand the left. This is the heart. If you can understand why whiteness means capitalism, this is what will explain everything else. Once you understand this, you can get everything else. This is the hardest one.